There are reports that a hostage deal with Hamas is close. Until there is an official announcement, we are left with unverified reports, heart-wrenching rumors, and a very long list of concerns regarding the potential last-minute manipulations of designated terrorists. The entire people of Israel are on their feet. Why? Because we sanctify life. We owe it to our brothers and sisters to bring them out, and because we are humane, decent, moral. This is not our weakness, but our strength. We also owe our sons, brothers, fathers, and uncles, as well as our female combatants, the honor of not giving in to the hideous, inhumane Hamas terrorists. We shall find the way in which to do both, maintain our moral integrity and stop the suffering of our brethren in captivity, but to also make our immoral enemy regret the day that they had decided to rape, murder, massacre, burn, carnage, and kidnap our people. You know, we are being blackmailed into releasing tomorrow's hostage takers to get back today's hostages. You see the indecency in pressing Israel to make concessions for getting our people back is inconceivable. You in the international arena who support that need to comprehend that you are setting a precedent, not only for the future attempts by the same and similar enemies to kidnap more civilians and soldiers here in Israel, but for our mutual enemies to kidnap your people, your soldiers, your fortresses, your schools, your streets, your democratic Western institutions. The infiltration has already begun. Hamas is demanding we release murderers from prison. What they aspire to do is to regroup and prepare for the next October 7th, funded by those who support Sunni radical Islam, Qatar, Turkey, and more, now that the Shiite axis has been somewhat weakened. One way or another, our hostages must come home, and we can never allow radicals to take new hostages, to spread their deadly ideology, to continue to indoctrinate their youth with hatred. The backers of radical Islam like Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and their cronies must be held to account. They blocked life-saving aid to hostages. They allowed Hamas to keep our hostages for 467 days and counting. They tried to tie Israel's hands so that it couldn't stop Hamas from attacking. They are behind this Hamas blackmail and are doing whatever they can to ensure that Israel does not defeat Hamas today. But they do everything I just said in Canada, in the US, in Europe, Australia, and elsewhere too. They try to also do it in Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. But in those countries, they are outlawed. When will the world wake up? When will it be too late? When enough Canadian grandmothers will, God forbid, be killed? When hundreds of thousands of more European women will be afraid to walk alone in the streets of London, Paris, and Berlin? When will enough be enough? What are the terms currently being discussed? A government source said that the deal is based on the May 27, 2024 proposal. But we are talking about freeing more hostages. In the first phase, 33 hostages are supposed to be freed from Hamas terror dungeons. It was 34, but the remains of one were found, and he had not been alive for some time. We should take everything Hamas says with many, many grains of salt. You see, Israel's troops are meant to begin a staged withdrawal out of the Gaza Strip while keeping some kind of a presence on the Egyptian-Gaza border, the Philadelphia corridor. Hundreds to thousands of the worst convicted terrorists will be released from prison. These are people behind the most heinous murders of innocents, absolutely drenched in their blood. This stage should last about 42 days. The second phase is meant to begin on day 16, with talks on releasing more hostages, and Israel's troops will leave more of the Gaza Strip. Gazans will be allowed to return to the Strip's northernmost parts. The Hamas is insistent on this. I wonder why. I'm reminding everyone, just in case you had forgotten, that the northernmost part of the Gaza Strip is in fact the closest to the Israeli border villages, which were carnaged on October 7th. In the third phase, all hostages or their remains will be returned to Israel. Israel's troops will completely exit the Gaza Strip, including the Egyptian-Gazan border, the Philadelphia corridor. They must come home. But the Hamas will pay for their sins. Let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Our first question comes from Cindy on Instagram. Do we know, will the released prisoners be allowed to return to the West Bank or Gaza, or will another country take them?
So there's talk of them, some of them returning to the West Bank, some of them returning to the Gaza Strip, and others to be returned to countries like Qatar, Turkey, that will take turns in hosting, if you can call it that, them and perhaps their families. There isn't 100% knowledge of what exactly will be the final wording of the agreement, but all of these options are being examined.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Talia. President Trump said that there would be all hell to pay if the hostages are not released by the time that he takes office. There are 5 days left until he takes office. What do you think will happen?
First of all, if this deal will be signed, there is, as I said, there are 3 phases. The phases will take longer than 5 days. I think that what the incoming president meant is that there must be a will or a kind of an agreement by the Hamas to start releasing the hostages. I hope, and I do believe, that there is an understanding amidst decision makers that are significant in the international arena that we cannot allow a designated terrorist organization like the Hamas to feel that it is worthwhile to take hostages. Because if we allow that, not only will it be a precedent for taking more hostages in Israel, but it will also set a precedent for taking your people as hostages. As I said, in the West, everywhere, no one will be safe, and no one is safe from radical ideology and Islam.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Instagram. How are the other Iranian proxies reacting to news of a potential hostage release deal? What can we expect from Hezbollah, the Houthis, and from the Iranian regime itself?
So there has been a tremendous weakening of the Iranian axis, the Shiite axis. That includes the Houthis, who are actually being warred against by a coalition of countries, not only by Israel, actually the US, the UK, and others as well. There has been a weakening of all the proxies, certainly Hezbollah, that the IDF has hit very hard. But does that mean that the Iranian tiger is laying still? No. On the contrary, I feel that a wounded and a hurt tiger is somewhat more dangerous. They may resort to very dangerous means via which to kind of return their honor, their national pride, or what they call their national pride, by killing, murdering, trying to strengthen their proxies by smuggling weapons, by smuggling drugs, by using other countries as passages for smuggling people, arms, drugs, and things that are absolutely immoral. So the Houthis, the Hezbollah, and others may seem glad for a kind of a deal that will allow the Hamas some kind of a breath of fresh air. But hopefully, this will be only temporary, and there is a significant weakening of the Shiite axis.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jason on Instagram. Less than an hour ago, after a mortar was fired by Hamas, the IDF issued an evacuation warning for Palestinian civilians in an area in the northern Gaza Strip. Should we expect to see more fire as the ceasefire approaches?
The IDF will not stop firing into the Gaza Strip so long as it has the specific targets against Hezbollah terrorists, Hamas terrorists, Islamic Jihad terrorists. In the Gaza Strip, of course, there isn't a Hezbollah, but against Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They will not stop until the very last moment of the ceasefire. We, as opposed to our enemies, honor ceasefires, and we will stop after, at least temporarily. But until then, so long as they fire towards Israel, we will fire back. And mind you, if they continue to do so, despite the agreement, Israel will have the full right to retaliate because the government has a responsibility to take care of its own civilians, like every government on the face of the planet. Thank you so much for being with us today. That's all we have time for. And we'll see you tomorrow again at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. East Coast time. Thank you.